Hey everyone, welcome to Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni from sunny Delaware today. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you either work in or have an interest in an FDA regulated company or its products, this is the podcast for you. So today's podcast is really rather timely because if you are in sales and you're trying to figure out how do you bring your product in front of people, if you are a pharmacist and you're wondering how do you bring your name in front of people, if you are a person in the life sciences, if you're in medical affairs, you're trying to connect with pharmacists, this is probably the conversation for you. And you should care because this is one of those conversations where you learn about, from a timely perspective, how do you connect? What's the best way to reach out to the people you want to talk to? So today's guest is the person we want to start talking with. And the person we're talking with is an individual who's helped bring pharmacists together. She has what I refer to as a disruptive conference company. And she is connecting pharmacists, patients, life sciences companies, and helping them understand how to work together. And this is coming up in a variety of different ways. But we're going to ask her more questions about this. So ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today, Vivian Frankel. Vivian, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Darshan. I'm so glad to be here. I love doing this podcast.
This is going to be good. So I have a really basic question for you. Why pharmacists?
They have a really important role, and I think actually we've been seeing that a lot lately, especially in the last year. And I think, it's something that's always been interesting to me. It's something that I think it's important for them to be able to get together and to talk to each other and exchange ideas. It's a it's a highly regulated industry, so there's always a lot of things for them to talk about. And the compounding pharmacy area, which is really what I've been diving into, is so complex and so diverse. There are all these different types of pharmacies and all these different levels of organizations in terms of the mom and pop pharmacy all the way to the large corporate. I just felt that there was a need for them to be able to get together, to talk, to learn from each other, as well as, they always have to get the ongoing credits and things like that. So we wanted to be able to provide all of that for them.
So it's really interesting. You talk about this idea that large pharmacies are there, but independent pharmacies need an opportunity to connect. Mm-hmm. And do you think that this a conference is where they can actually make those connections? And how has that worked out so far?
Well, it's interesting that you said it as a conference. It's actually, and you called us disruptive. That's actually why I started this organization and why I left corporate America. I wanted to be able to create a forum where people could better connect. And I felt like in traditional conferences, people, they kind of sit in the room and they listen to the presentations, and, you can try to connect to each other during the breaks or during the lunch or, the gratuitous cocktail hour, I call it. But I have found in some of my previous events, when I did events for corporate innovation, that what really helps people connect is being able to talk about a common theme. So I wanted to do events that were a combination of panel discussions, presentations, and roundtables. And then during those roundtables, people really get an opportunity to dive into that topic that everybody's interested in and get to know each other. And then later, when you have your lunches and your cocktail parties, you've already kind of become familiar with each other, and it provides a good, kind of a launch area for a deeper conversations.
So you talk about this idea that people can get to know each other and really first understand the topic. Mm-hmm. Two things to pop up in mind. Just so for people who are listening, what are some topics that you already have conferences ready for?
Well, I'm excited about, we've got one coming up next week, which is on opioid pharmacy management. And that is a 60-minute salon. And that is just a kind of an open round table. And we have two people who are running the salon, and it's basically going to be on inspections. So we have a DEA specialist, and then we have a hospital pharmacist. And I'm excited about it because we've put together a couple of basic questions, but the idea is that people show up and they can show up with what it is they want to learn. And, we'll go through the roundtable in terms of everybody introducing themselves and asking what it is that they're trying to learn. And then we'll just have an open conversation and try to figure out what it is that people are struggling with when it comes to pharmacy management for opioids. And then what I'm hoping as well is, if people have different topics and they want to branch out a little bit, then we can break out into the breakout sessions. Like I said, kind of just have the smaller topics, and then people can just sort of network and discuss that, even if it's just a one-on-one with somebody else or a small group. But that's on the 17th of March.
And how expensive is it to attend that one?
That one's actually free to register, and they can do that on our website, pharmasalon.com.
Now here's the question. I mean, I'm a skeptic, so I'm going to ask you this question. Why would you give it away for free?
Because, as I said, part of our whole company, I wanted to say motto, but not motto, but our ideology is to bring the compounding pharmacy or the pharmacy community together and provide a forum for learning. And that's one of the ways that I wanted to be able to do that. And, hopefully that will also, tie into some of our bigger events, which are not for free. But I just think in the online space, it doesn't really take a lot of for me to put these together. And it's good for the community. And I think it's good for everybody. And it's just a good way to kind of dive into some of these deeper topics. And everybody
I'm agreeing with you. And I think we actually have someone who's agreeing with us as well. Dinesh Anchal is actually writing in saying corporate sectors have a great gap, and that's in fact why they fail and why they fall. So everyone's agreeing with you that that's definitely an area. I'm actually going to be speaking on at the conference as well. So
that's our March 24th event. So our March 24th event is Compounding Pharmacies Business Salon, and the tracks are marketing, operations, and opportunities. And I put that together because so many events for the compounding pharmacy are they're important, but they have to do with all the regulatory stuff, things like in quality, in environmental monitoring, in inspection response. And I am planning an event for that. And as you know, we had one on that in August. But when I was planning those events, a lot of people are like, we need kind of some of the softer topics like marketing. So that's why I'm doing this event on March 24th. And I'm excited about that one too. And as you mentioned, you're the one, you're speaking at that one on the marketing track on sales and fraud.
So I'm actually excited to speak about that because I have a really good presentation planned for it already. So where can they sign up for that one, by the way?
They can also go to our website, pharmasalon.com/compounding-business. But just go to pharmasalon.com and you'll see the links.
Perfect. So now you raised this concept a few seconds ago, and you talk about these soft topics. Let's raise a few soft topics that come up as I see them. Okay. One of the soft topics is this idea that as an independent pharmacy, I remember working in independent pharmacies. I remember working in corporate pharmacies. You sort of feel like an island. You feel like you're isolated from everyone else. You have no idea what anyone else is doing, except unless you have a friend who works in another pharmacy, and you call them up and you go, so what are you doing here now? Like, how do you manage the situation? There is, for lack of a better term, a lack of a corporate culture. How does a pharmasalon help with developing culture, not just within the pharmacy, but across pharmacies?
It's interesting you said that, because I talked to a lot of people who have said things like that. Like, one of the things that we were talking about was visual inspections. And they were saying they do exactly that. They call up other people and they're like, how do you do this? Or I know there's a Facebook group as well, and people are like, kind of, how do you do this? And that's the whole idea, is that we can have this ongoing community discussions, again, tying back to the free salons, of people being able to get together and be like, just be able to get together and talk about how things are getting done, and create kind of a culture, kind of a cross-industry culture. One of the things that I know is always up for discussion is there's the USP 797, USP 800, as well as GMP standards. And there's always kind of, especially for the 503As, that line of where they should go. You've got the FDA trying to push them up, and they're trying to push, kind of resist that a little bit and say, we're fine. So I think we need to have some industry, some consensus on what the industry standardization should be, just not what the FDA is saying. So hopefully having these conversations will help everybody kind of get to that point where they're like, okay, this is where, we can all, where we all need to be, and this is why, and this is how it's been helpful for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it raises an interesting question, right? What I always think of is sort of this top-down type of organization where you've got pharmacy organizations like ASHPA, PHA,
Mhm.
blah, 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 all saying, well, let us be the banner under which you organize. And what
Yes.
I see you saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see you saying is a bottom-up type of discussion where you're saying, let's bring the people together, get their voices heard, and we'll construct a consensus around that, as opposed to here's what we think the vision should be, and we should go ahead. Do you see a difference between the top down versus bottom up models?
I do, and I'm not sure if, and I guess what I'm saying is you're going to have, like you said, you have those top-down things, and I know all those organizations are trying to get people to rise to achieve all those levels. But what I get, my understanding is that not everybody sees the point and the purpose, and they think it's not, or that it's not cost effective. There's a lot of resistance depending on the type of pharmacy and, the financials and the size and all that sort of stuff. So my hope is that if you're all getting together, it's not necessarily that you want to go against what those other organizations are saying, but maybe they get a better understanding of the benefits of it and how to do it. And, and if there is pushback, yes, like you said, then maybe they can kind of get together and say, well, this isn't really working, or this doesn't make sense, and have that bottom up approach to revising, maybe revising some of the policies. But essentially, I think it's to help each other, kind of learn from each other in terms of the benefits and how to do things. Like the other track in our business salon is operations. And, we're talking about budgeting and things like that. And how do you decide, if you're a smaller pharmacy, how do you decide where to put your budget, or how do you streamline your operations? And if you're learning from other people on how they did it, then maybe, that will help you get some better ideas on how you can also become more compliant.
So that raises the question, or at least the thought process in my head, where you talk about the from a top down model. You're really talking about people with a vision, saying this is the direction we should go. What I hear you saying is that vision's great. Unfortunately, what it also means that some people get left behind, because either for financial means, cultural means, or something different, they just don't think that that's the vision for them. What I hear you saying is that an organization like PharmaSalon, even though it's a events group, it really lands up being a representative body, because it sort of represents these other viewpoints that aren't being considered. And is that an unfair characterization, first of all?
I don't know if we're a representative body. I think we're just allowing people to connect and share information with each other.
Right.
We're just kind of providing the venue for that. I don't know if we're actually, yeah.
I should clarify. I'm not sure. I'm not suggesting that you represented them as much.
Right.
It was a forum for them to be represented.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification.
Like, wow.
But here's the question: in that scenario, how do you mentioned this idea a few seconds ago about how, in the context of larger groups, you have the loudest people talking first. And yes. I'll raise my hand. I'm one of the loud people, and I'm always happy to share my opinion. But there are people who are just as smart, who sometimes are just quieter. They sometimes just want to listen, and sometimes they're smarter than all of us in that room. So if that's true, how do you make sure that those voices are heard? How do you make sure that they are comfortable in that setting, that their voices should not only be heard but trusted? Is there a forum to make that happen?
Well, I mean, that's the magic question. My hope was that when people come, they come prepared to talk. I mean, that is the benefit of coming to one of our organizations. And I really try to push that, for the attendees, bring a story, bring something that you want to learn, bring something that you want to share with people. And, in our last event, we had a mixed response because people are shy. And especially, I think it's also harder in the online space. It's too easy to just sort of sit back, turn your camera off and be quiet. So, we're trying to do something where everybody, we limit the room to 10 people and encourage everybody to turn their cameras on. And, it's a little bit like the classrooms nowadays. And then we're encouraging all the speakers to say, let's go around the room, everybody introduce themselves, and, state what it is they're there for. What is it that they want to learn? And hopefully, that will encourage people to speak out and be a part of the conversation. Like I said, my hope is that, you're coming to Pharmasalon because you want to have friends and not just a listener. I mean, certainly we've got all the material for it, but I think everybody has something of value to offer. And I'd like everybody to hear it.
So that speaks to two different viewpoints that we discussed before. I can't remember if it was before the camera started or after, but the first question is, how is this disruptive?
It's disruptive because we're getting away from the didactic learning model. I mean, I'm not going to say we're the first person to do round tables. That happens, but I think all I know is when I was at these other companies, they really resisted. They resisted kind of a free form sessions as well, which I haven't been able to do as much as I would like to in the online space. Remember, when I came up with this idea also, it was based on live events. And I think people are more inclined to speak and chat in the live events, especially at a table. But I've noticed, our first event was in August, and we had a lot of round tables. Like we would have 6 round tables going on at the same time, when everybody could just kind of pick the topic that they wanted to be involved in. And I think that was really successful. I mean, like I said, we got some rooms where you only had a couple of people talking, but, and this was very different. Everybody else was just taking all of their sessions and putting them online, like in a webinar. Right. Where of course in the webinars, you encourage people to ask questions in the chat. We were just very aggressive about making sure that people were in a room of 10 and tried to talk to each other.
So what I hear you saying is that you created intimacy between these groups. Have you discovered the magic formula for actually having, even in those intimate groups, how do you prevent some people from just staying quiet? Or is it just there are certain things you can do and that's the end of it?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want to talk, somebody doesn't want to talk. But like I said, we're providing a list of questions for the facilitators to go through, and which is, everybody introduce yourself, and then you can't avoid it when everybody else is going through the room and introducing themselves. What is it that you were hoping to learn, or do you have a question? I think basically just getting the facilitators to actively go through and say, what is it that you're here to learn? And hopefully once people are kind of engaged with that conversation, then they'll be willing, more willing to chime in.
So it's interesting you say that, because it's one of the things that I do when I'm presenting, where I refer to, and probably I shouldn't be saying this considering my own skin color, but I put the quote unquote bomb in the room. And what I basically do is I say something that I know is provocative. And the idea is that it's going to cause factions.
Yes.
And I then want them to engage and interact with the quote unquote bomb in the room, because I want them to think, okay, what does this mean? What is the impact of this? And how does this impact how I do what I do? So I think that having this, for lack of a better term, forced intimacy at that moment causes you to engage in a way that you probably couldn't force someone to do if it was a room of 150 people. Obviously, 150 people is great if you're looking for just you want to connect with new people. But if you want to connect and create deeper connections, a more intimate room is probably a little bit easier to navigate. So that raises another question, which let me ask you this question before I jump to the next one. This non-didactic method of engagement, is that the same thing as an unconference?
No, the unconference was just where people go in and they sign, like you'd get, and I think that needed to be like 500 people. And you have like these whiteboards where people just would write a name down, and then a name at a time. So like, I could be like, okay, my name is Vivian. I'm going to have a session, on, how to control the weather at 10 o'clock. Sure. And then everybody else would just kind of join us, however you want. That's a completely unconference. That's the definition of an unconference. I was doing unconference sessions, which was, everybody, I call them unconference sessions because they were unfacilitated. And we would put a topic on a table, and then you would just go to that table and have a completely free-form discussion. And I would say 9 times out of 10, people really liked it. Every now and then, you'd have, like you said, kind of 1 or 2 people who just dominated the conversation, or sometimes it just didn't work out. Right. But for the most part, I would say, people like to get together. Also, it's a good break when you're in all these presentations all day. It's nice to just sit down and be able to talk to each other, which is why I said it kind of also enhances the networking. Because it's like, okay, we're going to take a break. We're just going to talk to each other. It's like, and people would naturally be like, my name is so-and-so, and I'm from company XYZ, and this is what I do. And I'm trying to figure out, I keep going back to the visual inspections. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do a visual inspections.
Right.
And I'd love to hear how you do it and stuff like that.
But here's my question. When you have an unconference, how do you make sure that the people who don't have slides can keep the conversation going for 45 minutes, which is often what you're looking for, right?
Well, I'm not doing an unconference. I
mean in general. Yeah. When you did it, how does that work?
I just did the unconference session. I just did a couple of sessions.
Oh, as an attendee?
No. I just read it as I read about an unconference, and I took that idea and I applied it to our traditional conference with the unconference session. So right. We still had regular presentations throughout the day, sure. But I would do like one or two free form sessions a day, and there were no slides. Like I said, that was just it was just a roundtable discussion.
Right. So in those roundtable discussions where there were no free form slides, you'd kept maybe a half hour to 45 minutes as free time. How do you prevent someone from going, you know what, I listened to it, I needed only 15 minutes, turns out it wasn't as big a topic. Do you just let them then walk around afterwards? And that's just, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what happened. And, sometimes I would do them before lunch, and people would go the other way. They would just stay there and, have a big conversation. I mean, and that's kind of why I think corporate America was very uncomfortable with that, because it's sometimes, it could go either way. A lot of times people want conference producers are very controlling. They want to make sure every second is perfectly scheduled and worked out. And this was a little too freeform. And like I said, sometimes it did go badly. And then, you'd get people who are like, well, I just sat there and nothing happened, or it was sort of pointless, or one person dominated. So what I did start doing was having facilitators in there, and the facilitators would bring 3 questions. So to kind of help get the conversation going and making sure we don't just have 1 or 2 people, talking over everybody else. So there was a bit of a learning curve. But on the whole, I would say that they were always the most cited favorite sessions, which is why I always wanted to do more, because people get bored with the presentations. I mean, I know you get a lot to learn, and especially in something like the compounding pharmacy space, which is highly regulated. I mean, you do need a lot of those sessions. A lot of them is straight information on, how to conform or to whatever certain regulatory
sure.
things. But it doesn't mean that there's not like things to learn from each other, like SOPs. I know people are always complaining about SOPs. Let's get together and talk about, how do you do them? Do you actually do them yearly? Because I know you're supposed to do them yearly, but not everybody does. And,
right.
Just things like that. So, I mean, it's not totally 100% guaranteed, but I would say for the most part, people really enjoy them, and they do work out.
So that really raises let's sort of go back to regular conferences. And when you're talking about regular conferences, you talk about this, there's this big burgeoning idea. I think one of my favorite ones was there was a women's conference on how do you get more women involved, and it was 5 men on the panel. And I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition, which raises the question of diversity. How do you ensure diversity in viewpoints and representation on your forums?
Well, in terms of roundtables, I can't. It's just whoever wants to sign up. But I do try to, when I'm booking the speakers and the panelists, then I certainly do try to balance things out. Like we've got some panels going, and I don't know if I can do if I say I demographically can do ensure diversity, but I certainly try to in terms of the industry. So in our opportunities track, We've got a couple of sessions going on. We're exploring some of the sort of the future things that are happening in the compounding space. And we talked a little bit about it. One is personalized medicine, and how compounding pharmacies can be more involved in personalized medicine. So we have quality is one of the issues. So we've got somebody from a lab, we've got somebody from an insurance company, we've got somebody, a professor, and and two compounders. So I think it's a nice diverse panel in terms of the different perspectives that really will round it out. Like, the insurance company is, how are we going to pay for it? The lab is, how are we going to do quality? The other people are the logistics, and how to manage the patients and stuff like that. And I certainly try for demographic diversity, but it's not always, you do the best that you can.
So tell me more about that. So how I love your answer on you do the best that you can, because that's what a lot of people face. Tell me a little bit about just the compounding pharmacy world. Is it a diverse place? You've had more conversations than most people on compounding pharmacists. Are they mostly white, cis-het men, if you will, for lack of a better term, or is it something different?
I would say I have a variety of speakers. I think it is dominated by a lot of white men, but I'm not going to say it's all white men,
Okay.
older white men. I do think we have a pretty good variety. We have we have a number of women involved, and I do think we have there is racial representation as well.
Okay.
Probably not as much in certain demographics as there could be. But I would say it's not completely, we're not looking at a complete panel of all older white men.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, maybe we are on that particular panel I just said. But there is some diversity. The whole conference isn't just that one demographic.
Sure. But in general, is it, as an industry, does it tend to be, for lack of a better term, monochromatic?
I don't think so. I've got a couple of speakers that I talk to regularly, and it's not all the same.
Got it.
So I would say there is some variety.
Now here's an interesting question, which I was sort of thinking about. Compounding pharmacy is one of those things where you are, quote unquote, personalizing medicine for patients, which really raises the scepter of patient centricity. Has there been enough conversation, as far as you can tell, around patient centricity in compounding pharmacy, or is that still an area that's emerging?
I think it's still emerging, and that's why we're talking about it. And of course, when you talk about patient centricity and what they're doing, you have to talk about the 503As versus the 503Bs. Now, certainly the 503As, as you know, they're doing one-to-one. But I think what we're talking about, when it comes to personalized medicine, which is what you're talking about, right? There's a lot more hoops to get through. And like I said, that's why we're having this topic. One of the things that came up is quality. How do you do it? How do you ensure quality? I forget what it was. Was it CAR T cells? How do you, for example, how do you extract the CAR T cells? How do you get it to the lab? How do you get it back and maintain, all the proper, maintain the integrity of what you're doing. So there are a lot of things to work out. And then of course we have our insurance guy to talk about how are you going to get this all paid for? But
Right.
One of the conversations is a conversation I'm excited about, because we're going to be talking about that, as well as how do you better integrate the practice, the pharmacy with a doctor's office or a practice? Are you going to be looking at them in one space?
Yeah.
Which I know some people are exploring, and, but there are a lot of exciting things going on. And I think we are moving, we are definitely moving closer to that, which I think is interesting when you start talking about vaccines.
Yeah.
I was thinking about all that, how some people are complaining about the vaccine and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, because not everything, you can't get one drug. It's not 100% for a lot of people, but hopefully eventually it will be once we move further along with the personalized medicine.
Let's stay tuned for that. Let's ask one last question before we sort of delve in a little deeper into something else. Live events. Everyone is. We've got. I think someone just announced yesterday that by May we'll be drowning in vaccines because you'll have the Johnson & Johnson, the Moderna, the Pfizer. You've
Yeah.
got people, President Biden coming out and saying what we want is everyone should be, every adult, I believe, should be able to get their vaccine by May May 1st. If that's true, what does that mean for conferences? Do you see yourself? You said you originally thought of Pharmasalon as a live event. Do you see that being the case in the future?
Yeah, I think what most people are thinking is we've now adapted to this online space. I think, people have been talking about online conferences and, doing webinars and things like that for years. But I don't know if it really took, you know what I mean, in terms of like conference companies. I mean, you get webinars and stuff like that, and some of them are very successful. But I think now that we're all like kind of more exposed and more used to now learning in this environment, there's a bigger comfort factor. So I think what most conference companies are going to be looking at is a hybrid model. I know we were thinking of doing that as well. And because there are benefits. I mean, travel and taking time out of the day and things like that to being online. But so I think it's really nice to be able to offer for both. I mean, certain people like live events. They go to it not just because they want the education, but they go to get away from the office and to, get to better. I mean, it's not a vacation, but you know what I mean? It's just like kind of a change of space, which is nice. And I think it's healthy. Get out of the office, do something a little bit different. But not everybody has that opportunity. So I think really we're going to be looking at hybrid models. So people can choose to either come to the event or they can just participate online.
So we do another section, just so you know, for our guests to figure out a little bit more about them. So we have rapid fire questions. Would you be open to answering?
All right, shoot.
Okay. What's an accomplishment you're most proud of?
Pharmasalon.
Okay. When are you most inspired?
When am I most inspired? You mean time of day?
Sure. Whatever you want, however you want to answer that.
I've taken up paddleboarding, and I am most inspired when I'm out on the water, just kind of communing with nature. That's when I get all my good thinking done and stuff like that.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Actually, I was doing one of my panels, and somebody who I think is a industry leader said that he was very impressed by the topics that I put together, and that kind of my connections in terms of ideas was brilliant. And I always like it when I think people who are smarter than me give me some props.
That's awesome. Who is your hero or heroine, and why?
Would it be bad if I say Xena?
No, not at all. I think it's a great answer. Why Xena?
I don't know. I always was, when I was younger and Xena was a thing, because I love big, strong women. And, she was always powerful. And I always, I know people talk a lot about not having female heroes, but I'm kind of a big person. I'm quite tall. And I always hate that, like, a lot of the people that, everybody talks about who do you identify with, and, not seeing yourself. And all these actresses and actresses, and even the female heroes are always so tiny. And they're these like petite little things. I just love that she's like this giant warrior, and I don't know. I just always love Xena.
So I have to ask a follow up. It's not part of the 10. Who's your Gabrielle?
Who's my Gabrielle? I don't know. I haven't got one.
Okay. So there's a Gabrielle job in the future for someone.
There is. I need somebody to be my Gabrielle.
Fair enough.
It would certainly make my life easier.
Right? What is your favorite way to give back to your community?
Well, like I said, these free salons, I'm hoping, is a way of giving back to the community. Okay. In terms of personally, we're involved in, in neighborhood stuff and things like that. I live in LA, and there's a lot of opportunity to work with the community and do things. And we try to do that.
Very cool. How do you define success?
How do I define success? That's an interesting question that I have been mulling over a lot lately and talking about. I guess success is, it's going to sound shallow, but right now success is people enjoying my events and coming back for more.
I love it. What challenges you?
What challenges me? This. I feel like I'm being too company centric. I don't know if you want like more broader questions.
I think you're doing great.
I mean, certainly starting a new company in the middle of COVID has been a great challenge. It challenges you on so many levels, intellectually, personally, emotionally, things like that, as any entrepreneur will tell you, or businessman will tell you. It's quite the ride.
But yep.
Yeah.
Where was the best vacation you've ever taken?
Zanzibar. Love Zanzibar.
Zanzibar. Now that's not an answer I ever expected to hear. That's awesome.
Yes.
Why Zanzibar again? The beaches?
First of all, Zanzibar was like the coolest place on earth. And we met these guys and sailed around on a catamaran for 3 days and just then went back and rented motorbikes and drove all around Zanzibar. And it was just, like I said,
that is so cool.
Yes.
I kind of have to ask this question, but I feel like you already answered it. But what is the most fun you've had recently?
I kind of, like you said, it's, because of the lockdown. Well, I will say there have been a couple of things that have happened in the past year that was fun. We did take a trip up to Lake Tahoe with some friends of ours. It was still in lockdown, so we all locked ourselves in a house, but Lake Tahoe was really fun, and we got to do hiking and biking and stuff like that. I like being out in nature. And then, of course, like I said, on a regular basis, it's, the paddle boarding is my meditation and my fun and stuff like that.
I was referring to Zanzibar, but I like your answer more.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking more recent. Unfortunately, Zanzibar was when I was younger, and Zanzibar was awesome. Okay. But yeah, that was like way back in my youth. Huh?
I just like saying the word Zanzibar.
That's I know, who doesn't, right? Who doesn't?
Last question. I'm trying to choose. Okay, here's one. If you were going to build a 2020 Mount Rushmore, who would be the first person on it and why?
Oh, Lord. Well, of course, you. For helping me out. I don't know if your audience knows this, but you help me out a lot. We talk and we have good conversations and things like that. Okay, I guess, I don't know. I have to think about that.
I thought that was a good question. I thought that was a good question.
It is a good question. I don't know. I have to think about it.
Okay. We're gonna let you get away with just throwing me onto Mount Rushmore. I'll have to deal with it. It's fine.
There we go. Exactly. You're gonna be everybody's hero soon. You'll be up there.
You're very kind.
I'll throw my husband up there with you because he puts up with me. How's that?
I think he should be on there over me, to be honest, but I appreciate it.
Well, Mount Rushmore has 4 or 5 people, right? So.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
Here's a question for you. Based on our discussion, what is the one question you'd like the audience to answer for us in the comments?
Based on what would I like the audience to answer? I don't know. Give me an example question. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be like, what is it that you're looking? I mean, there's general things. I guess one of the biggest questions that I've had in doing these conferences online is kind of the formats. We're playing with formats. And one of the things that we're doing, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, is for the March event, like I said, there's 3 tracks and it's over 5 hours, which I know is a lot. So we've made it so that we're recording all the sessions and people can download them and receive their CE credits for over a month. So they can either watch it live or they can do the recordings. But I guess that's the kind of the thing is what are people looking for? Do they want, they need the information still, and I'm sure they want to still meet people, but how do they want to do it? Is it like in 1 hour sessions? Is it, one day? Is it, like a series? Yeah. That's kind of the biggest thing that I've been wrestling with is like how to present all this information.
So if you guys hear the question, they'd love to hear Vivian would love to hear the answer. So please respond down there. So during this podcast, we discussed just the fact that you're the founder of Pharma Salon. We talked about the different types of salons. We talked about your experiences, and we talked about it briefly, but we talked about just how you became an entrepreneur. We talked about the value of representation in conferences, how you disrupted the conference industry, how you create intimacy. You also discussed what an unconference is, if you will. How do you generate trust and representation for people who may not have their opinions heard as much as they probably should, and how they can be heard, if you will. And we also then got into this idea of live events and are they coming back, and is our live events part of the past? And you talked a little bit about how a future might be more of a hybrid future, if you will. Mm-hmm. As we should also explain, nothing in this podcast would be legal or clinical advice or even advice that's right for you. It's intended as educational and entertainment purposes. So for those of you who missed it, where can they find you?
At pharmasalon.com, spelled PHARMASALON.
And your name's Vivian Frankel. So if you like this podcast, please leave a comment, subscribe. You can find me at Darshan Talks on Twitter, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Vivian.
Thank you very much.